we saw as being potential from all of us. And it's to Carol's great skills and her hard work ethic that this was all pulled off so well. So thank you, Carol. I would be remiss also, I think, and I think we all might want to have a word or two to say about a member of this group that is not with us today, Professor Richard Boberg from the Zoology Department. When we were involved in building a museum to the level of the credibility that we had in 1978 to advance the Iowa Hall plan, I don't think we would have been to that point if it hadn't been for Dick Boberg. He was magnificent, and he was a very powerful voice, a very persuasive voice in advocating the value of this museum to the central administration particularly, but elsewhere. And he certainly recognized the application, the value of the museum specimens for and exhibits for integration into the undergraduate curriculum. I'll pass the microphone down here in a minute. I also want to recognize David Dirks from the Iowa Foundation. You know, it's so hard. I see so many faces out there, but Dave Dirks, I have such good memories of going out on the fundraising circuit with Dave. And Daryl Wyrick, Olga Sassine, all of the people at the Iowa Foundation, just magnificent, so professional. And Dave has always been a friend and an advocate of the museum, and frankly, I don't think that this would have happened either if it hadn't been for David Dirks. Dave, someday you'll have to write a book.
Well, in addition to that, I just wanted to say that the staff increases that we were able to get as Iowa Hall developed and unfolded include other people in the audience as well, like Robin Lilly, who is our first executive secretary. This was pre-computer days. I mean, I think we got our first computer when you were on staff, right? And a computer? What the heck is that, you know? In addition to, you live in a museum environment within a university that's full of specialists. And the university, rightly, should be peopled with specialists. And I and George and some of the other guys are a lot more of the generalists. You know, I thought of myself as, you know, a guy with a biology degree who happened to be an artist, who happened to be a designer. But trained as a biologist and raised by a Marine, but that's another story. And you take the mixed bag of jobs, like, well, one day you're teaching a class, the next day you're up here building something in Iowa Hall, the next day you're out in the field with somebody like Gene Pryor collecting a specimen that, you know, weighs 50 or 60 pounds and lugging it back to the museum for display in Iowa Hall. It was a wonderful experience, especially for somebody who suffers from adult hyperactivity disorder. You know, because there's never a dull moment, and every day is a new and completely different challenge. And I think that's really a wonderful way to live life. And I think most of you in the audience are probably pretty familiar with that style of life. So I'll keep it on going here before I say any more.
Again, I'd like to just emphasize that you hear a lot about interdisciplinary activities. And generally, that's somewhat disappointing, because interdisciplinary means that you're doing your regular job for your discipline, and somehow you're working with other people who are outside your discipline. And often that doesn't work too well. This is a case, though, of where we had these individuals who, body and soul, were committed to this project and worked together in such a positive way. Also, it was a huge amount of fun. Most of these people have an incredible sense of humor, and so we've had endless little stories maybe we can relate about teasing one another about. I remember when, for example, Gene Pryor showed me the exhibit of the glaciation in Iowa, which was to segue into the Paleo-Indian exhibit, which was to segue into the archaeology, anthropology part. Why, was beautifully written and presented, and part of the icing on the cake was to use the Dvorak New World Symphony to kind of end that and bridge you on. But the script in there actually talks about the Paleo-Indian bands. And so I said to Jean, Jean, that's brilliant. I can even hear the Paleo-Indian bands playing Dvorak in the background. And then she hit me for that.
A couple of comments here. George was talking about outreach earlier. One of my jobs when I first came to the university, and a job that I held in varying degrees throughout my tenure here, was that of undergraduate advisor. Initially, it was a general advisor. Later on, I became undergraduate advisor for geology majors. To get the conversation going, when a new student came in to sit down, I would almost invariably ask them what their first impression, their first idea of the university would be. Invariably, it was the Museum of Natural History. This is the greatest outreach facility that this university has, barring none. It's really amazing the way they remember this. They attach to the university because of this. Change the subject a little bit. We've talked a little bit about Neil Deaton. He and Laura, his wife, are sitting there next to my wife. You want to go up and talk to him after this is over. Neil painted the diorama that George and Will have been talking about a little bit this afternoon. I went in when he started painting. And Neil walked in the diagram. There was no floor or anything in it in terms of the exhibit. Obviously, there was a floor there. And he walked in with a can of green paint. And he had a brush, and he started at one end of the exhibit, and he went over the other side. Put down the green paint, came in with, I think it was blue paint, started at the same end of the exhibit, dipped his brush in, worked his all the way across. What is going on here? Then he got some brown paint. I think you can see where we're going, and he worked his all the way. And all of a sudden, the green paint were trees. It was marvelous. Then the clouds came in. He didn't look at a plan. I know he had a plan in his mind. There's no question about that. But it just materialized. It developed. It came out of the blue. It was truly amazing to watch that man work. And Laura was also heavily involved in this as well. My first experience with her, or at least I should say her first experience with me, when I spilled my cup of coffee on her desk over in Newton one time. She was very polite about that, said, oh, that's all right. But you could see her papers were kind of dripping.
It doesn't leave much for me to say. I want to point out one other name that hasn't come up, and that's Ben Kozak. At the time, he was working for an outfit called Merritt's Communications, and Ben and a gal named Lee Embry were very helpful to us throughout the project. And I'd hope maybe Ben might make it in the audience, but I don't see him out there, so I just wanted to make sure that his name was mentioned. Finally, I'll just say I had a bunch of slides I was going to bring, but I figured nobody'd let me show them, and yet one of them is a picture of Jean Pryor at Reich Studio up in Chicago that looks like she's just about getting ready to be eaten by a dinosaur. I'll have to send it to you. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen. We have about 20 minutes, and I think one of the things we're going to do is have some questions from the floor. I don't think our cards got sent out, and we're a small enough group. You folks are all familiar with this gallery, and I think it'd be great to see what your kind of questions are. Russ.
I'd like to hear about ground slug, giant ground slug.
Rusty.
Rusty, how did you come up with the idea to do it, and then how did you move it in the whole thing?
I'll take that one, or at least start on it. We wanted a model of a Pleistocene mammal. We wanted something that was different. And first thing that everybody thought about was a mammoth or a mastodon. Everybody's got a mammoth or a mastodon in some form or another. What's unusual? And Duane said a ground sloth. Everybody looked at each other and we all nodded, and it was a ground sloth. Pat Gully built that, and it looks like it weighs 1.5 tons. It doesn't. 4 people can pick it up. It's made out of styrofoam. And with the help of Greg McDonald, whose specialty, he's National Park Service geologist, paleontologist, he's sort of Mr. Sloth of North America. He did his dissertation on sloths, and he knows more about it. And there is a fairly complete sloth, it's at least half complete, from American Falls, Idaho. The skull on that sloth is about the size of a skull from that was found in Turin by Duane's group at the Sanford Museum. And so we had a skull, the size, and so the size of that animal is the size of the American Falls specimen. Pat got sheets of styrofoam and glued them together sort of like stairs in that leaning position that you have. And then he got a hedge trimmer and he roughed out the sloth. And then, of course, he built up the legs and trimmed this out. And pretty soon, Greg came through with his calipers, and we measured this. And, of course, you have to figure out how thick is the skin. Well, we don't have skin for megalonyx, that happens to be, but we do have skin from a mylodont in South America. So it has the mylodont skin. Do we have a bicolored animal? Most animals have a lighter belly than they do back. The mylodont sloths in South America seem to be monotone all the way around. And when you get down to it, most forest animals, which is where we believe the sloth live primarily, are also the same way, black bears, this sort of thing. Deer, you know, they're fringe animals. They go in one and out the other. So after this is the way we decided on the coloration. We wanted hair, and this is where Pat and his wife excel themselves. When you see these ads and it says wigs, natural hair, I can tell you about that. They went to Chicago. They went to a packing house when they collected 50 burlap sacks of 50 tails each. I think that multiplies out, of cow tails. 100. 1,500 cow tails. Yeah, it's 1,800 cow tails are in there, however many. And what they did, they were a greasy mess. And they took the cow tails out, degreased them, and bunched the hairs together in groups of 6 with a little bit of knot. And then Pat covered the sloth with something that, let's call it a glue, a plastic that set up very slowly. And then they started setting in these hair. It looked like a hair transplant that you see, and then he just kept working up. And so when you lift the skirts of the sloth, you can look up under there and see that. But I think he did a really remarkable job. The guy is a perfectionist. I don't think he would mind my saying this. He did not want to do the leaves, the trees. He says, I don't do good leaves. When you go up, look at Pat's, and Neil's leaves are right next to it. Pat wanted Neil's leaves. There's no question about that. But the university, in its way, we have a contract. This person's going to do the contract. So that's the way it came up.
Just a reminder that sloth is one of the 7 cardinal sins.
Gentlemen, how did you get Rusty inside the building, or was he built in-house?
He was carried intact through the front door. There's several pictures. I think some, if you've got this brochure at hand, I think one of the pages has a picture of us preparing to hoist the sloth and carry him in the front door. So he was literally, he was on a litter. He was literally just carried through the front door. He just barely fit, but that was the plan. To have the door big enough for the sloth, not the other way around. But that's how he got in the door, just walked.
Wonderful. In the back.
One of the reasons that I walk into these are many islands gave small parts of themselves. Would someone care to recount the story of Pincock's Nut?
Pincock's Nut. Obviously, Duane's going to handle that.
The Iowa Archaeological Society has chapters all over the state, and of course, is the state.